Hello, 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 and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. And I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Good Monday morning, everybody. Great to start the week with you here. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show. It's a very grim time. Every week we do this, the news just gets worse and worse and more dangerous and more threatening of an all-out regional war, which is apparently what Benjamin Netanyahu wants. And the big news this week is Israel assassinating Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and murdering an untold number of people along with him just by leveling entire residential buildings in the Beirut suburb of Dahia. And Israel has now expanded its bombing campaign in Lebanon, displaced more than 1 million people. We don't even know the actual death toll because Israeli the Israeli murders just don't get the attention that other murders would get. So we don't even know how many people Israel has killed, but certainly this is getting worse and threatening to veer into a ground invasion of Lebanon. So we're here to recap what we can. And I guess let's kick it off. We're going to start, though, with Meet the Press. And let's see how Meet the Press is recapping this apocalyptic time.
With Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. There are only 5 weeks until Election Day. And on Tuesday night, one of the biggest moments of the campaign, the debate between the vice presidential nominees. And with no second debate scheduled between former President Trump and Vice President Harris, the stakes could not be higher.
The problem with Kamala Harris is that she's got no substance. The problem with Kamala Harris is that she's got no plan. And the problem with Kamala Harris is that she has been the vice president for 3.5 years and has failed this country. Let's send her back to San Francisco where she belongs.
He admitted to creating stories about people that live in his state, immigrant families, to spread fear and drum up hatred. They're probably not telling the truth about a lot of things if they're not telling the truth about that.
I like the way he says that. It's so wholesome and Midwestern. Like they're probably not telling the truth about other things. Like as if they could possibly, as if that could not be the case. Like he's not going to say that they're liars. He's like so Midwestern and polite. He's like, there's a good chance they're lying about other stuff.
The vice presidential face-off comes against a fraught backdrop both nationally and on the world stage. At the forefront, the assassination of longtime Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Israeli airstrikes in Beirut on Friday. NBC News has learned that officials in the Biden administration felt blindsided by the strikes, according to current and former U.S. officials. At home, Hurricane...
Oh, they were blindsided. Who could have seen this coming?
Right.
Israel, which has refused every ceasefire offer, which, like, right before it bombed Beirut, rejected the latest U.S.-French proposal for a 21-day ceasefire. Who could have seen this coming? That Netanyahu would have expanded this. This is like the longest-running, highest-level performance piece I've ever seen. It's like a one-man show, in which Biden, aided by his top deputies, pretends as if he's being totally blindsided by Israel constantly murdering people and escalating the war. And he's just constantly in shock and having to scramble and deal with it. When, of course, he's on board with this all along. He recognizes that for, Israel, this is like a once-in-a-generation opportunity to destroy all the forces in the region that resist its aggression. And that's what he's fully on board with, no matter how many civilians Israel kills. That's what this is. And he accomplishes it by pretending to be outraged at Netanyahu sometimes and blindsided when he bombs cities with U.S.-made bombs.
Yeah, but then, Aaron, what happens is really important, which is that there are tough conversations afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to hear a lot about that today.
Yeah.
From Biden spokesperson John Kirby.
Helene is leaving scenes of devastation across the Southeast, from Florida to North Carolina, Georgia, and beyond. Millions are without power, Dozens have been killed and the death toll is still rising. On the campaign trail, both nominees blanketed key battleground states. Vice President Harris making her first trip to the border as the nominee, again attacking former President Trump for killing a bipartisan border deal.
It should be in effect today, producing results in real time right now for our country. But Donald Trump tanked it. He picked up the phone and called some friends in Congress and said, stop the bill. Because, you see, he prefers to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
For his part, former President Trump is asking.
You know, that bill, by the way, which, you know, Biden did agree to and Trump did, I think you can fairly say he did sabotage it. Amnesty International called it one of the most draconian anti-immigrant bills ever, something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, right? Because it was like a harsh militarization of the border, supported by Joe Biden and agreed to by Republicans in the Senate. And it's true, Trump did kill it because he wanted to be able to run on immigration in the election. But the reason why Joe Biden did it is not because he wanted to particularly get tough on the border, although of course he does too. He also really needed money for the Ukraine proxy war. So that was the deal he was going to get. He was going to get his money, the Ukraine proxy war, in exchange for throwing undocumented immigrants further under the bus. And he didn't get it because Trump stepped in. But it's just funny how no one ever points out, like, hey, do we need to be militarizing the border even more and punishing people trying to flee persecution? That voice is just totally gone now. It's just now basically, why didn't Trump approve or allow for this harsh anti-immigrant bill?
Right. It's kind of comparable to the way they try to show off who's more genocidal on Palestine. They also try to show off who's more draconian on migrants.
Exactly.
While not
Escalating his rhetoric.
While not, of course, getting to the root causes, as Kamala Harris famously was assigned to do, to get to the root causes of immigration. She doesn't talk about anything like the sanctions that we impose on those countries that encourage people to, or make it harder for people to stay there, etc. But she did have a very good policy plan, which was, as she said to Central Americans, do not come. Do not come.
The Biden people love these short instructions. Like, you know, whenever Biden's asked, like, hey, like, Mr. President, what's your message to Iran or Russia? Right. He just goes, don't do it. So don't do it and do not come. That's pretty much the Biden administration mantra. It's, you know, interesting approach to foreign policy.
Against migrants and attacking the vice president.
I will stop all migrant flights immediately. They should stop them tonight. She can do that. Just sign one little page saying stop the migrant flights. But she won't do that. They're infecting our country.
She's taken in the worst of those people, the killers, the jailbirds, all of the worst of the people. She's taken them in. And then I have to sit there and listen to her last night.
Now, as both candidates focus on immigration, we've got brand.
I mean, this is his big campaign thing, is just demonizing immigrants. The language there, they're infecting our country.
Really, really disgusting. Yeah.
I mean, that's just outright bigoted language. But that's pretty much all he's got to run on. He can't pretend to be draining the swamp anymore because he expanded it. He's not going to run as being anti-war because he's on board with certainly the Biden administration when it comes to Israel. He's fully on board with that. And in fact, he's threatening to be even more extreme. He talks a little bit about peace in Ukraine, but doesn't have much to say about it. So his main thing is just demonizing migrants.
Right. It's one of his, it's like his greatest hit.
New polling this morning. I'm joined by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki to take us through the new NBC News, Telemundo, CNBC poll of Latino voters. Steve, break down these numbers for us.
Yeah, Kristen, some interesting stuff here. Again, we see every 4 years the Latino vote becomes a bigger and bigger share of the overall electorate. Well, among Latinos, our poll shows Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump 54 to 40%. Now, for some context, this is a little bit better for Democrats than they were doing among Hispanics when Joe Biden was their candidate. But I think the bigger story here is historically, 54 to 40 now is a 14-point advantage for the Democrats. Take a look back at the last three presidential elections, and these were the results in the exit polls among Hispanic voters. That 14, look at that cut there, almost 20 points less than just 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, we were saying Donald Trump had made inroads with Hispanic voters. This suggests that that has continued apace. So what is driving this shift? Well, we see a few big gaps here. A gender gap. Familiar with this one?
All right. Well, that's enough of Steve Kornacki,
Yeah.
who goes on for a while. But that's interesting. And look, that just speaks to this will be a close race. This will be a close race. It's going to be a nail biter. And we have just over a month left of this. And, you know, a lot more Steve Kornacki to hear from.
Yeah.
But
Right.
we're going to turn
we do want to
to.
thank him for his service. He's always extremely enthusiastic and tireless and indefatigable, if you will.
He really is.
With his interactive Instagram infographics. Yeah. Okay.
As exciting as he is, though, we're going to turn now to the state of the Middle East, which continues to get worse. And the Biden administration, responding to Israel's assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, along with, again, we don't even know how many other people were killed when Israel leveled, you know, a number of residential buildings along with Nasrallah and the people he was meeting with. But these were huge residential buildings. It was a massacre. We just don't even know the actual toll. But let's listen to White House spokesperson John Kirby, how he's responding.
President Biden glad that Israel took this action?
I don't think anybody's mourning the loss of Mr. Nasrallah, a known terrorist, a guy with American blood on his hands as well as Israeli blood on his hands.
Well, actually, there are actually a lot of Lebanese who are mourning Hassan Nasrallah, because for them, and again, Lebanon, like any country, is not a monolith, so there's big divisions, but Hezbollah does have a strong base of popular support. Why? Because they were the force that resisted Israel in its occupation of the country, which began there's a few invasions, but the main invasion by Israel is 1982, after which they killed tens of thousands of people. That's when Hezbollah formed to resist it. And they, led by Nasrallah, they drove Israel out in 2000. And so Hezbollah also had a network of services providing for people's needs. And even in Lebanon, people who didn't share Hezbollah's ideology, its brand of religious doctrine, he had wide respect because he was seen as, you know, protecting the country from Israeli colonization and Israeli aggression. So there are a lot of people actually in Lebanon and around the world, as we're seeing with the footage, mourning Nasrallah. So Kirby is forgetting them.
Yeah, and I highly recommend, if people haven't already seen it, that people watch our interview with Heidi Francis, who is a Lebanese journalist who talks all about this. And something also interesting is that you had several Christian leaders in Lebanon also mourning his death, because this was I think the West likes to present, I think, Hezbollah as this like Islamist, fundamentalist, radical organization. And the truth is, you don't have to be Muslim to feel like you're being protected by Hezbollah.
This is a terrorist organization. He was the leader of it. And I think people are safer without him walking around. But they'll try to recover. We're watching to see what they do to try to fill this leadership vacuum. It's going to be tough.
Well, I mean, who's safer? Because right now, Lebanese are being terrorized. 1 million people have been displaced. And it's not Hezbollah displacing them. It's Israel. It's Israel, you know, carrying out mass bombings of the country, including not just in Dahia, which is the neighborhood where Nasrallah was killed, but also they launched a strike in Beirut, deep in Beirut, on Sunday in a neighborhood that's not even Shia, you know, which is that's what Hezbollah is. So anyway, who's he talking about safer? And again, you know, why did Israel do this? Because Hezbollah intervened on October 8th when they first launched rockets at the Israeli-occupied Sheba farms, which is Lebanese territory, but Israel stole it along with all the other Arab land that it's stolen. And Hezbollah intervened because they wanted to put a stop to Israel's assault on Gaza. And that's been Hezbollah's goal from the start, since they announced this on October 8th. And they've kept it at a low intensity. And I think they figured, or they hoped, that, you know, them tying Israel up north and forcing people in Israel to flee their homes would force Israel to stand down and stop bombing Gaza, which was a calculation that failed. Israel is so hell-bent on destroying Gaza, asserting its supremacy, that it wouldn't enter into such negotiations. And according to NBC News, Israel tried to reach an agreement with Nasrallah, but he insisted that he would not delink Lebanon from Gaza, so that any deal with Israel had to include a ceasefire for Gaza. Now, again, Lebanon is not a monolith. There are people in Lebanon who are critical of Hezbollah for dragging Lebanon into Israel's war in Gaza, because those two fronts are separate. So, I don't want to say that Nasrallah's decision had the support of everybody, but the fact is, the reason his organization exists is because Israel invaded Lebanon. It was founded and Hezbollah was founded to resist that Israeli aggression. And so this was a logical step in that trajectory. And now he's paid the price of it for his life. And compare that to many other Arab leaders who've done nothing for Palestine. It's a contrast worth noting.
Yeah, and it's so rich and ironic and disgusting that he was killed in the Dahiya neighborhood, because that, of course, is the neighborhood from where the Dahiya doctrine comes, which is Israel's illegal doctrine of responding with disproportionate force. We brought this up, I think, very recently, but proportionality is one of the hallmarks of international humanitarian law. You're supposed to respond with proportion, and of course Israel incorporates violating international humanitarian law into their policies, like the Dahiya doctrine.
Exactly.
It's really
right.
disgusting.
All right.
Also, but Aaron, you said who's safer? I mean, I think we know that people like Kirby don't see Palestinians or Arabs as people. So of course, when he's saying people are safer, he's talking about Israelis. So you should apologize to him for not getting that.
And we haven't seen Hezbollah really retaliate yet. But I don't know. I mean, look, maybe this is a fatal blow to Hezbollah that some pundits are saying it is, but maybe it's not. And maybe this will make Israelis, which is the only constituency in the Middle East that John Kirby cares about, maybe this will make them even less safe too. I mean, we'll see how Hezbollah responds. But the point is, it's encouraging at every step. More death, more escalation. That's the U.S. policy.
Yeah.
Okay, back to our favorite game show host, John Kirby.
Their command structure has now been wiped out.
So the Israeli strike targeting Nasrallah flattened several large buildings in the heart of densely populated Beirut, the suburb of Beirut. Do you have any indication at all what the civilian death toll might be?
I don't think.
Whoa, Jake Tapper early on is asking about Arab civilians and suggesting he's even, concerned for their lives. I think that personally, my theory here, why he's asking this question, which is, not in character for Jake Tapper, aka Fake Yapper, as Max Blumenthal calls him, because he was caught this week smearing Rashida Tlaib, as we covered on last week's Monday Morning, where he said basically that she was anti-Semitic because she criticized the Michigan prosecutor for prosecuting pro-Palestinian protesters, and he was caught just outright fabricating what Rashida Tlaib actually said. Rashida Tlaib said nothing about the prosecutor being Jewish. He just said the prosecutor's biased against Palestinians, as many prosecutors are. And so I don't know. My hunch is Jake Tapper's trying to make up for that.
I think it's because he watches our show and we put him on notice.
I think we have an exact number, Jake. What we certainly assume, in fact, we go so far as to say we know that there are civilian casualties here. There's no question about that.
I mean, dozens, hundreds, thousands?
I don't think we can quantify it right now. We're in touch with our...
Okay, just imagine, by the way, if Putin flattened a neighborhood to kill Zelensky. Imagine how Kirby and the American government, the U.S. government, would describe those civilians. Do you think they'd be like, we're not sure about how many died. We don't know. We're not sure yet. But we think, actually, we know that some did.
Yeah, he's so blasé. He's just like, we can't quantify it. And it's true, because they don't care. They don't count Arab civilians when they're killed by Israel. They just don't care.
Israeli counterparts about that. Each single civilian death is a tragedy. And certainly, while, again, nobody's mourning Nasrallah's death, we certainly...
Okay, why do you have to say that again? That's obviously a talking point that he came in with, and it's obviously not true.
Again, I believe the funeral for Nasrallah is today. You will see how many people are mourning his death. Um, Hezbollah has a huge base of support inside Lebanon. Again, people even who don't support Hezbollah, Nasrallah did have a lot of respect because of, he had a history and a reputation notoriously for not being corrupt, for being pious, and for standing up to Israel, which even people who don't share Hezbollah's ideology across the spectrum did respect. This idea that like no one is mourning, he's just completely ignoring the people of the region, even if there were all sorts of differences with Hezbollah among the people. There are certainly
Sure,
a
right.
lot of people mourning his death.
Yeah. And there are protests in Iraq, for instance.
We do mourn any loss of civilian life.
So before President
Yeah, we can see you're really torn up about it. That's why you don't even have any idea about how many were killed.
Obama gave the order for SEAL Team 6 to go in and take out bin Laden, there was talk of an airstrike against the compound, and the decision was made to not do so, A, because they weren't sure about the intelligence, and B, because they were worried about, Obama was worried about civilian casualties. The Israelis went a different direction, obviously their intelligence.
So this is Jake Tapper, in his classic passive-aggressive way. Now he's trying to draw a linkage between Osama bin Laden and Nasrallah, because he's comparing the strike on bin Laden to the strike on Nasrallah. Nasrallah, by the way, and Ronnie Akalik pointed this out, Nasrallah, but after 9/11, immediately condemned 9/11. He said, he had a line, he said, like, what do those civilians in the towers have to do with their government's policies, right? Like what did they do? He basically said that Al-Qaeda killed innocent civilians.
Yeah.
And by the way, Nasrallah was an avowed opponent of Al-Qaeda. He fought Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria in the U.S.-backed dirty war, where the U.S. was supporting an insurgency dominated by Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So you'll see a lot of this now, this attempt to like link Nasrallah with Al-Qaeda, when in fact they were bitter enemies. And Nasrallah, condemned Al-Qaeda's attack on the U.S.
Yeah, but Aaron, they're all Arabs, so Tapper doesn't really see any difference among them.
He really doesn't. He really does not. Yeah.
Was solid. But do you think Israel made the right decision doing it the way they did it?
Again, I think having decimated the command structure of Hezbollah certainly works to the Israelis' advantage. It's actually good for the region, good for the world. I'll let the Israelis speak to the decision-making process they made, why they chose to go this route. We are continuing to talk to the Israelis about what the right next steps are. And as you...
Oh, great. That's wonderful. Keep us posted on that.
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. It's good for the world.
Yeah.
I think better for the world, uncontroversially, would be a stop to all this killing, all this slaughter, and that could be accomplished by Israel finally stopping its assault on Gaza, which was Nasrallah's sole goal. But Kirby and the Biden administration, they're fundamentally committed to Israeli aggression, so it's good for the world if Israel has free reign to continue destroying Gaza, expanding the war to Lebanon, killing, we don't even know how many people, displacing more than 1 million people. That, to John Kirby, is good for the world, not stopping Israel's aggression against, by the way, a territory that it's occupying, which is Gaza, as it also continues its rampages in the West Bank, which the Biden administration just will not stop, because they're fundamentally committed to Israeli occupation and aggression. And it's all about what you're committed to. Some of us want peace. Other people want expansion and occupation. And unfortunately, the latter group is in charge of the White House right now.
Yeah, I also want to just say that, earlier on he talked about how Nasrallah and Hezbollah have blood on their hands. I mean, the amount of blood on this guy's hands is staggering. And anyone who calls, if anyone who calls Hezbollah terrorists and calls Nasrallah terrorists were remotely honest, they would have been condemning the terrorism of Israel much more forcefully, because the civilian count of Israel's attacks, I mean, it's staggering and totally dwarfs whatever civilians were killed by Hezbollah, which are very low number. But no one talks about that. So they're the terrorists, and the people who are actually involved in ethnic cleansing and genocide are the defenders of democracy. So disgusting.
All right.
Sorry, guys, we got more.
Yeah, we'll do. And actually, and by the way, let us know. I'm curious to know how how the volume is on these John Kirby clips, because we had this issue last week with CNN clips, but they're a little low. So let us know in the chat how this is sounding to you. And if it's sounding too low, then mercifully we will skip more John Kirby. But let's for now go to more John Kirby.
And condemned the killing of Nasrallah and said the U.S. is, quote, complicit in Israel's actions. How concerned is President Biden about the potential for a direct conflict, a direct military conflict between Israel and Iran, and maybe even involving the United States? Iran certainly has tried any number of things, including recently hacking President Trump's campaign, talking about an assassination attempt on President Trump.
Yeah, so this is intelligence officials claiming that Iran hacked Trump's campaign. And Trump has been saying that Iran has been trying to kill him. I haven't seen any evidence for that. Iran denies it. But of course, Jake Tapper, because it serves his goals of warmongering with Iran, he just repeats it, that yes, Iran is even trying to kill Donald Trump, even though I don't think, I mean, maybe I've missed it. I haven't seen any convincing evidence for that whatsoever. But anything to warmonger with Iran, Jake Tapper will do it.
How concerned is President Biden about a possible direct confrontation between the U.S. and Iran?
We've been concerned almost since the beginning of this conflict about it broadening, widening, becoming a regional war. That's why, again, the president and the G7 leaders just a few days ago talked about calling for a 21-day ceasefire.
Yeah, how did that go? Any update on that 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon? What happened was Netanyahu ignored it. He signaled initially he was on board with it, and then decided he wasn't, and authorized that strike on Nasrallah. That's what happened.
Yeah. And everything else that the president's been doing, including adding force capability, military forces to the region, is designed to prevent that exact outcome. Now, we'll watch and see.
Sending more forces for war in the Middle East is designed to prevent war in the Middle East, according to the Biden administration.
Yeah. Aaron, you don't get it because you're not in the State Department or in the Biden administration. But if you were like smarter about geopolitics, you'd get it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm of the school of Marvin Gaye, who said, "Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer. Only love can conquer hate." You know,
Right.
so that's
Maybe
what I think of.
That's why they had to kill him.
That's what I think of when when I see Biden ordering more forces to the Middle East. I don't see it as like a tension diffusing measure.
Right.
But I guess, you know, you're right. It takes a certain kind to be in government, and they see things we don't. And for them, sending people off to fight is a way to calm tensions.
Right. Well, it's like, remember that the members of Congress were playing those war games to prevent war somehow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Seen the rhetoric coming out of Tehran. We'll watch and see what they do. We certainly will make sure that we have the capability to not only defend our troops and our facilities, diplomats and military, as well as Israel itself. If it comes to that, hopefully it won't.
There was a State Department spokesman the other day who said that he didn't know of any incident in recent history where escalation led to de-escalation. And that is obviously a concern when it comes to these big strikes by Israel, no matter how abhorrent the targets, if there are civilians that are taken out in the process. Do you agree that escalation seldom leads to de-escalation?
Wow, Jake Tapper, he definitely was watching our show, because he's bringing up the fact that it should be obvious, of course, but this is he's referring to a State Department official, an anonymous one, who said, "I can't recall, at least in recent memory, a period in which an escalation or intensification led to a fundamental de-escalation and led to profound stabilization of the situation," which, it's kind of insane that he even has to ask this as if it's a controversial take. Like, do you believe that escalation does not lead to de-escalation? Do you agree with that? Do you agree that water is wet?
The State Department spokesman said?
I think what we would agree on is that there needs to be an effort to de-escalate here. Again, Israel has a right to defend itself and a responsibility to do so. I mean, Hezbollah, under Mr. Nasrallah, was a lethal threat to the Israeli people. They want to get their families back to those homes and kibbutzes in the north. We want to see.
You know, by the way, in the so there've been about 10,000 like there have been over 10,000 exchanges of fire on the Lebanon-Israel border since October 7th. And Israel was responsible for 81% of those exchanges. So, Israel was firing far more into Lebanon versus what Hezbollah was launching into Israel. So this idea that Hezbollah was this lethal threat to Israelis, it's just absurd looking at the numbers. And you can see that now. 1 million people displaced now in Lebanon. Israel bombing the capital, Beirut, and areas, terrorizing people around the country. But John Kirby can sit there and say that it's Hezbollah that's the threat to Israel.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Israel's a threat to everybody because it insists on defending its occupation of Palestinians. That's what it comes down to. And John Kirby insists on defending that. And as long as this is going on, people are going to resist occupiers, especially given Israel's history of like being created by the British imposing on the people of the region this Jewish ethno state that most people there didn't want, and resulted in expelling hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and stealing their land and stealing more and more and more over the years. I mean, in that situation, people are going to resist. And it's like, as long as the Biden administration or whoever's in charge is committed to that, this is just like the recipe for forever war.
Yeah. In the last 24 hours, Israel's killed 109 people, Lebanese people, and Hezbollah has killed 0 people, just to give you a sense of this. And also, he brought up lethal threat to Israel, but I thought America liked lethality. I mean, remember Kamala Harris bragged at the DNC that we're going to have the most lethal fighting force?
Yes, that's that lethal joy that she's running on.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Lethal joy. Yes. Yeah.
And also, like, again, it's just so, their double standards are just built into it. Like, if he cared about lethal threats, he would be concerned about what Israel's doing to Palestinians and to Lebanese people. But again, he only sees non-Arabs as people. Like, he doesn't see Arabs as people. And when they talk about how terrible it is that Israelis have left their homes, the Israelis who have left their homes are in hotels. Does he care about the Palestinians who have been driven from their homes? Where are they? They're in refugee camps that get bombed.
Yeah, and people in Lebanon are sleeping outside because they have nowhere to go.
Right.
Yeah, it's so unbelievable. Everything is so unbelievably racist, and it's just ignoring the humanity of so many people, the indigenous people actually of the region,
right?
Not this ethno state that just terrorize everybody. It's so skewed. It's so skewed. Okay.
I know we're giving a lot of money to Israel already, but maybe something else we could do is we could donate some funds to Israelis in hotels and try to get them like upgrades. So like a breakfast could be included, or they could get like a suite in their hotels.
I'm sure there is a pro-Israel charity working on that right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could find a fund for that. Okay, let's turn to Marco Rubio, Republican senator from Florida. His thoughts on the widening aggression by Israel right now.
Senator, let me turn to the other big news this weekend. Of course, out of the Middle East, the revelation that Israel has killed Hezbollah, confirming its leader Hassan Nasrallah. NBC News confirmed just this morning that Israel used a U.S.-made 2,000-pound bomb in the strike that killed him. You are vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. How do you expect Iran to respond, and how concerned are you that this could ultimately lead to a wider conflict between Israel and Iran, Senator?
Well, I think if Nasrallah was still alive, the threat of a broader conflict is even higher. This is the guy who cheerfully said, death to America, death to Israel. Now, when you're a country and someone runs an organization that exists for the specific and defined purpose of destroying you, you have no choice but to treat that person as an enemy and to confront them likewise. This is the guy that spent...
So wait, by that logic, okay, if he's saying that you have no choice but to attack them, then if they're threatening to wipe you out and are wiping you out, does he also think that Hamas has no choice? But
the difference is that Israel is actively rejecting and suppressing the existence of Palestinians and their right to self-determination. So, I mean, that's why October 7th happened, is because there was no reasonable opportunity for any kind of diplomacy to achieve Palestinian liberation under the longest running military occupation in the world. And so Hamas was trying to change the equation by launching a military operation. You can certainly say that Hamas has failed in that and that it's been a disaster for Palestinians. You know, I don't think, I mean, these things happen over a long term, so who knows? But I mean, this is really, I think, this has obviously been a disaster, a huge crisis. But in terms of like who's a threat to whose existence, it's Israel that's the threat to the existence of Palestine by actively destroying it, and everybody else who tries to stand in the way. And that's the problem here. Nasrallah wasn't committed and wasn't motivated by trying to destroy Israel. He was motivated by trying to liberate Palestine. It's true, he didn't see Israel as a legitimate entity, and his goal was to see in Palestine a state where everybody's equal. That was his goal. He was not on board with the rest of the Arab League, which has long offered Israel a huge compromise of everybody recognizing Israel in exchange for Israel withdrawing from the occupied territories and creating a Palestinian state. But Nasrallah wasn't on board with that. It's true. What he wanted was equality for everybody. That is not destroying a people. That just means pushing for everyone's equality. And by the way, had Israel ever taken up that opportunity that it was given for decades by the PLO, by the Arab states, of peace for a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, I really don't think that Hezbollah would have stood in the way. Iran even endorsed that Arab League peace offer at one point in 2017. And Iran and Hezbollah are very, very close. People like Mark Rubio call Hezbollah a proxy of Iran. So would Hezbollah really have stood in the way if actually for the first time in its history, Israel agreed to stop colonizing Palestinians and stealing their land and recognizing their right to self-determination in just 22% of the land that Israel stole from them, which is what the West Bank and Gaza is? I don't think Nasrallah would have done that. And that's the fundamental problem here. It's like the extremism that he attributes to all of Israel's adversaries is in fact the extremism of Israel and the US, which stand alone in rejecting Palestinian self-determination.
Right. And again, I mean, regardless of what you think of October 7th, like the point is that Rubio's logic is an endorsement of October 7th. Of course, he's not, because he doesn't see Arabs as human beings and only cares about Israelis and Americans. But that is the logic of what he's saying.
Yeah, and the difference is that Palestinians have an argument because they're the ones being occupied.
Right.
Right. So if you're occupying another people and you're facing threats as a result of that, you don't have the right to just wipe them out, which is what Israel does. If you're occupied, you have the right to resist. Whatever you think of October 7th and the wisdom of it, there is a right to resist military occupation. There is.
Yeah.
You don't have the right to kill civilians,
right.
which happened. You do have the right to resist occupation, but you can't, like, that thought can't even enter these people's heads. It's because, as we talked about, they just don't see Arabs as equal human beings. Okay, more Rubio.
Years, cheering on suicide bombings that killed innocents, the kidnapping of Israelis. There are 60,000 Israelis right now who, for almost a year now, have had to leave their homes in northern Israel and are living in hotels in Tel Aviv, and their kids are going to school online.
Again, that's why I'm going to push once more my idea to give them upgrades.
Yeah, and how are the kids in Gaza, how are they going to school right now? Their schools are destroyed, and there is no school.
And there's no reliable internet to do Zoom classes like he's lamenting Israelis have to do.
Yeah. Okay. That's enough of Marco Rubio. Always helpful to hear from him. Let's go to Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona.
Okay, yeah.
Start with the Middle East, the death of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah. You just heard me discussing this with Senator Marco Rubio. Are you bracing for Iran to retaliate?
Well, I think the IDF sent a powerful message to Hezbollah, and I was listening to what Senator Rubio had said, and I couldn't agree with him more. I mean, Israel needs to get its population.
Okay, here we have it, guys. This is our two-party system. Here's the range of opinions. Marco Rubio celebrating the killing of Nasrallah in the Republican Party, and then in the Democratic Party, you have something totally different, which is Mark Kelly celebrating the killing of Nasrallah. So much to choose from.
Back, to the northern border, and this has been a really challenging situation that they've been faced with, and they've got to do something about it. It's good Nasrallah is dead. He's a terrorist. He's killed so many innocent people. And
so, if someone killed Netanyahu, would he say it's good that he's dead because he's a terrorist who's killed so many innocent people? Because his death toll is pretty high right now.
He would not say that.
Okay.
He would not.
Just checking.
There would be a day of national mourning inside the U.S. Terrorism really, it just comes down to whether the U.S. elite supports the violence or not. And if they don't support the violence, then it's terrorism. If we do support the violence, like in the case of Netanyahu, it's self-defense. Yeah. Okay, we can go.
We got to go to the next Mark. We got to go to the next Mark Kelly.
Mark Kelly. Okay.
Yeah, because this is yeah. So here's more Mark Kelly, and here's Welker, who does a kind of a something a little bit more adversarial than we're used to.
Start with the Middle East, the death of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah. You just heard me discussing this with Senator Marco Rubio.
No, it's the next clip.
Are you
Sorry,
bracing?
It's the other Mark Kelly clip. It's 4.5.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Isn't that the one?
I want to talk to you about big picture a little bit, Senator, the way in which Israel has been conducting this war. You and I discussed this back in May, and here's what you told me.
They have to do a better job. I want to see some changes here, and I've talked to the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador, Michael Herzog, about this specifically, that if we don't see some changes, I think it is appropriate to put conditions on some of this aid.
So you told me there, Senator, Israel has to do a better job. Have they, since you first told me that back in May?
Well, we continue to have this discussion with the Israelis. I talked to Israeli leadership about this and have made it very clear to them that the type of weapons they use and where they use them, it matters, and it matters a lot. This is a dense urban environment.
God, the language they have to use to avoid giving a direct answer, and this is their new talking point. Like this is Kamala Harris. She says Israel's right to defend itself, but how they do so matters.
Right.
Okay, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean it matters? Of course, everything matters in life.
Right.
Like we're all here. Of course, everything matters. Like how we all conduct ourselves matters. But what are you actually doing to rein in that conduct? The answer is nothing. So this is just a convoluted way of admitting that they're doing absolutely nothing. So he's asked, like, do you think Israel has improved? And he says, like, we're having conversations. This is like it matters. Like, they won't answer the question because they can't, because they know the answer, that Israel is continuing to carry out routine massacres with U.S. made weapons. So it's just an endless tap dance.
Yeah, and also because he's being exposed as lying. I mean, let's watch the rest of it, because she actually asks him this question again. But again, he said that there needed to be conditioned, right? If they kept committing war crimes. I mean, he didn't use that word, but let's keep watching.
Environment. In my background as a naval aviator, flying in combat over Iraq and Kuwait, it's a challenging situation to be able to take out a target where there is a civilian population. But this is a terrorist organization.
There is only a civilian population inside of Gaza, which is a concentration camp. I mean, these countries that Mark Kelly bombed, like Iraq, they also were incredibly depleted and didn't have much of a defense, but at least they did have an army. In Hamas, there's like a guerrilla force, like with Hamas, you have a guerrilla force, but they don't have air defenses. They don't have like tanks and planes that defend themselves. So Israel's just bombarding a defenseless civilian population pinned into a concentration camp. And he's talking about how this is like some kind of tough call, like it's just a complete slaughter. This is not a perfect analogy, because again, Gaza's occupied, but say like, I don't know, somebody commits a kidnapping at someone's house. Does the victim of the kidnapping have the right to go and like bomb the building where the kidnappers might live? Like, is that a sensible answer to a kidnapping? No, but it's like, and again, the analogy is not fair because the kidnappers, in this case Hamas, they're living under occupation, right? So it's not even, but it's like this idea that all of a sudden we can just go and blow everything up because some militants happen to be there. It's just completely, it's totally skewing the basic laws of war. But after a year of genocide, it's deemed to be totally normal.
Yeah, it's interesting that in May he was upset about it, and he's no longer upset about it. I wonder what's changed.
Dealing with Hamas is responsible for initiating this conflict with what happened about a year ago on October 7th. So we continue to talk to our allies, Israel, about how they're conducting this operation. Hey, you know, civilian loss of life is tragic wherever it happens. And, you know, the Palestinian people that live in Gaza, they're not Hamas. There are Hamas terrorists there that Israel is focused on eliminating because they cannot have this threat so close to their border.
Senator,
but it's a continuous discussion.
Senator, you said, just to be very clear, I think it's appropriate to put conditions on some of that aid if you don't see some changes. It sounds like you are not at that point yet where you want to see aid conditioned. Do I hear you accurately?
Yeah, that's correct. We continue to talk to them. I've seen some positive responses from them when I have specifically asked them to do things differently. Here's an example. I mean, the use of guided munition with a Mark 80 series bomb, you could hit a target very accurately. If you're using naval gunfire, that doesn't work so well. I've had those discussions. We see more of use of guided munitions, JDAMs, and we continue to provide those weapons. That 2,000-pound bomb that was used, that's a Mark 84 series bomb to take out Nasrallah. That was a guided, I'm pretty confident that was a guided weapon.
Oh, well, that really inspires confidence. He's basically bragging he's complicit in war crimes. Like, he's involved in these discussions. He's so happy. He's like pleased with Israel following his advice. He's basically saying, I'm proud to take part in massacres of civilians.
Yeah. He's also saying, ignore all the stuff I said about how the aid should be conditioned. Remember when I pretended to care about civilians? That was a lie.
Yeah. Wow, that is very revealing. Okay.
By the way, guys, I'm sorry. We watched these clips. They're very painful. Please give a like if you haven't already. We are under 0.5%, under 50%. Let's see where we're at now. We got to get these numbers up a little bit. I'm being very patient and generous. We got 2,667 people watching. We only got 1,000 likes. Let's get 1,000.1 likes, so 1,100 likes. Let's get that number a little higher. Let's see where we're at now. All right, good. Thanks, guys. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so we're going to turn now to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Oh, so good.
He is appearing right after
CIA head.
Former head of state, yeah, and he's appearing right after Senator Chris Coons on Fox News. So you'll hear that referenced. Unfortunately, today we're probably not going to have time to hear from Senator Coons, my former train seatmate.
Right. But it's nothing to do with the fact that that he kicked you off the train. That's not why we're not showing him. We were prepared to show him. We just have.
I'm not spiteful. No. No. He gets plenty of airtime here on Useful Idiots. But let's turn to Mike Pompeo, because again, how are Republicans responding to all this? Well, their only criticism of Joe Biden is that he's not deferential enough to Israeli aggression and not supportive enough. Which I don't know what more they want him to do. Like, do they want Joe Biden to go over and personally launch the U.S.-made bombs that he's giving Netanyahu? Like, that's the only way I think that Joe Biden could be more actively involved in Israeli aggression than he currently is. But
he could sign the missiles, like he hasn't done that yet.
He hasn't signed, as far as we know. That's true.
And written messages on it. Yeah,
it's true. All right, let's hear from Mike Pompeo.
It's now former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary, good to have you with us. What do you make of what the senator had to say about the fact that the Biden-Harris administration has been full-throated and unequivocal in supporting Israel?
Well, good morning, Shannon. Look, Senator Coons is a nice man, but he's just living in a fantasy world. The most important people who make the determination about whether America is providing enough support, frankly, are the...
By the way, I'll go back to this, but did you feel triggered by this, by his calling someone who had you kicked off a train a nice man?
Do I feel triggered by him calling Chris Coons a nice man? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is triggering. Yes,
All right.
yes.
All right,
yes.
I just wanted to check in with
I
you.
did not experience when he had me kicked off that train. That was not nice. No.
Yeah.
No.
Senator Coons is a nice man, but he's just living in a fantasy world. The most important people who make the determination about whether America is providing enough support, frankly, are the Iranians, Hamas, and Hezbollah. And they have felt free to fire missiles into Israel, kill 1,200 Israelis, continuing to hold Americans hostage. We don't even talk about that anymore. They're still hostages held by the Iranian regime in Gaza today.
Yeah, we don't talk about the hostages because Netanyahu has abandoned them, as the hostage families have complained about openly. Like, so that's why they're not being discussed, because Biden and Netanyahu have abandoned them because they'd rather destroy Gaza and expand to Lebanon than free the captives inside Gaza. So that's why they're not being discussed. And again, he's saying that the Iranian regime is holding these people captive in Gaza. So basically Hamas is simply the Iranian regime. It's just so stupid. If you look at Iran, what have they done? Like, when Israel bombed their consulate in Syria, Iran telegraphed their response so that there wouldn't be a major escalation. Iran, like, the president was just in New York for the UN General Assembly. He talked about wanting peace. Like, they're clearly not trying to escalate. This idea that Iran is behind everything, that's the obsession of Mike Pompeo, because they want to bring this war to Iran ultimately. That's why he's saying that.
Right. I mean, it's just so funny because the Iranians they're so vilified as evil. And, the worst thing you can say about anyone is that they're an Iran proxy. And yet they've used self-control and they've used restraint that Israel hasn't, used at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, both Nasrallah reportedly thought that October 7th was strategically stupid. That's what I've heard about what Nasrallah said about Hamas on October 7th. And certainly there's just it seems very clear that neither Hezbollah or Iran were aware
Right.
of what Hamas was going to do, that this was not coordinated with them. This was, I think, an operation, a lone wolf operation by Hamas's military wing, which, because there is an axis of resistance of, states and groups that are committed to resisting Israel, Hezbollah did get involved in a limited way by, firing across the border. But clearly, I don't think this is something that they wanted. And Pompeo, though, wants to pretend as if Iran is behind everything, is pulling the strings.
Instead of talking about a ceasefire, which is what Secretary Austin spoke about, what Secretary Blinken speaks about, we should be saying plain and clear, finish the job. Nasrallah would be alive today if the Biden administration ceasefire had gone into effect. The entire Hezbollah leadership would be alive today if the Israelis had agreed to the ceasefire.
Yeah, and so would, hundreds and probably thousands of people who've been killed by Israel in its bombing of Lebanon so far, but their lives don't matter to him.
Right.
And many more people who are going to die because of this commitment to endless aggression and defending Israel's occupation. That's the fundamental premise here. He wants to kill more people to defend the Israeli occupation of Palestinians. And so, this idea that it would be a bad thing if Nasrallah was still alive.
Right.
It would mean that many people if we care about innocent people, many people would be alive, not displaced, and that we wouldn't be heading now into the threat of a regional war.
Right. Thank God oh my God, imagine if we had that ceasefire and a regional war weren't more possible than it had been before. Thank God.
Hamas had demanded, and that the Iranians had demanded, and the United States had supported. Make no mistake about it. We know history. We know the history from 1967. We know the history from 1973. There is only one thing that will protect Israel and make the Middle East more prosperous and peaceful, and that is the demonstration of power and imposing costs on Israel's adversaries.
So he's citing 1967, where Israel pretends as if it's about to be attacked by the Arab states, which was not true, and launches a war in which it steals territory across the region. It stole the Golan Heights from Syria. It stole the Sinai from Egypt. It stole the West Bank from Jordan, which was then controlling it, even though that's Palestinian land. and it stole the Gaza Strip as well. So he's setting that as a good thing, this year of, Israeli aggression and land theft. And then 1973, what happened there? That's Arab states, Egypt and Syria, trying to get their land back. So they attacked the Arab territory that Israel was occupying to try to get it back. And they almost got it back. And because they almost got it back, Israel reached a peace deal with Egypt a few years later, the Camp David Accords, because Israel saw that there were costs to holding on to all the stolen territory. And by reaching a peace deal with Egypt, it could take Egypt out of the equation and accelerate its land theft of Palestinians, which is what it really wanted to do. So that's what he's citing as a great historical precedent.
Right. Well, this is a man, of course, who bragged that in the CIA they cheated and lied.
Well, that's what he's doing right now. I think we're good with him. We can move on to. Let's see here. We only have limited time left.
Let's see, which is the biggest one?
We have so many warmongers to choose from. Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham.
Oh, let's do we gotta do Tom Cotton.
Tom Cotton, okay.
Yeah.
I believe there will be an expanded war between Israel and Iran on the horizon.
Well, Bob, I'm not sure that Israel's expanding the war so much as it is trying to end the war. I think it's important to stress just what a huge blow the last 2 weeks have been against Hezbollah. Iran is behind all of these terror.
Again, remember, escalate to de-escalate. Expand war to end war.
Networks, but Hezbollah is its most potent weapon. Hezbollah has over 100,000 rockets and missiles and mortars aimed at Israel. Iran has used that threat to deter Israel for years, going back probably 20 years or so.
So here he is making the case of why Hezbollah exists and why people are grateful, which is that Hezbollah has deterred Israel. But because he's such an evil person who sides with Israel in its killing of civilians, not as collateral, but as part of what they're doing, he doesn't get that he's actually justifying Hezbollah. Because you'd have to see like Arabs as human beings, which he doesn't.
And now that Israel has absolutely devastated the entire leadership structure of Hezbollah, whether it's at the attacks that came just late last week, killing not only Hassan Nasrallah and all the other leaders, or some of their other actions, or hitting their weapons depots and manufacturing sites in Syria, now is not the time for a ceasefire or to de-escalate as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want. Hezbollah is on its knees. The United States should help Israel drive Hezbollah to the mat and choke it out and finish it off once and for all. That means for the first time in decades, Iran would be exposed on its flanks with no terror proxy capable of devastating Israel or our troops and our friends in the region. That's what we should do, not demand that we have a ceasefire, de-escalate at a time when Israel is trying to win. We should let Israel win.
So that's pretty much our spectrum right there. You have Joe Biden, Kamala Harris pretending to call for a ceasefire, even though they have no intention of actually trying to seek one. Because if they did, they'd simply just use a leverage on Israel. And then Tom Cotton, who doesn't want even Biden to pretend as if he wants a ceasefire. That's the spectrum, basically. Both are committed to Israeli aggression. They just go about it in different ways. Joe Biden pretends he wants a ceasefire while enabling Israeli aggression. Tom Cotton just wants to openly, with no caveats and calls for and like lip service paid to ceasefire, just wants to openly back Israel. So that's pretty much the spectrum right there.
Yeah, he's actually offended by the idea of a ceasefire. And that language is so disgusting. Choke it out.
Well, he's using a wrestling analogy there. He talks about, to the mat and choking and, the world is so horrible. We don't have time to psychoanalyze the people making it such a terrible place, but a lot could be done there with Tom Cotton, especially like what's going on with him. But these are the people. This is the policy. I mean, Tom Cotton claims he disagrees with Joe Biden, but this is what Joe Biden's policy is. He is backing Israel as it capitalizes on this moment to just destroy anybody that resists it and kill as many civilians as it wants along with them.
He's just offended that he doesn't want. He's offended that Biden is playing lip service to caring about ceasefire.
Exactly. Okay. I guess we've time for one more clip. We've heard
Lindsey?
from a lot. I think we could skip Lindsey Graham.
Wow.
We know what he's going to say. Let's turn to let's turn to, how about we hear from Stanley McChrystal?
Oh yeah. Oh, this is a good
go,
one.
Let's go to.
We should go to the one about the jugular, right?
Okay. Sure.
I think
So
that's a good one.
So Tom Cotton wants to take Hezbollah to the mat. Retired General Stanley McChrystal is talking about the jugular. And who's Stanley McChrystal, by the way? He's the guy who was accused of covering up what happened to Pat Tillman, the former NFL player who volunteered to go fight in Afghanistan and was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan. And there was a whole cover up, and there was a false claim about Pat Tillman being killed in war, and he was a war hero when really he was killed by his own forces. And Stanley McChrystal allegedly helped cover that up. And he also oversaw torture of prisoners inside Iraq. So that's Stanley McChrystal. And
that's his
of course, someone like that is going to be presented as a voice of reason on corporate TV. So here he is.
I believe the Israelis and Prime Minister Netanyahu pushing Iran into a corner, as you put it. Does that mean war with Iran, between Israel and Iran, is on the horizon potentially? And what does that mean for the United States if true?
I think anything's potential on the horizon, but I don't know.
What are you watching now, though, to see if this action with Hezbollah assassinating Nasrallah escalates?
Look at him, not even wearing a suit jacket.
I know. I know.
You don't see that too often. You don't see that
No.
too often.
What kind of, maybe he watched you on Piers Morgan, the first Piers Morgan appearance, and was like, look at that guy. He's not wearing a suit. I don't need to either.
And he was inspired because, again, I mean, this is a, probably like not the most important thing, but anecdote. But I didn't wear a suit the first time because I was too busy doing Useful Idiots Monday morning. I didn't have time to change. But maybe he was inspired by my sacrifice for the show.
Yeah.
He
was probably working out or something before.
Something far wider in the region. What are you watching? What are the key points?
Well, I think the key thing is the more you press the fight, the harder you go for the jugular, the more you create scar tissue that's going to last for generations. And that's a factor.
That was kind of surprising. That almost reminded me, not quite, but it was a little bit like, remember when Leon Panetta actually said that what Israel did in the pager attack was terrorism?
Yeah.
This is not at that level, but this is a guy kind of implying that maybe this will backfire.
Well, yeah, and this is like, I think the furthest you can go if you want to make a critique of Israel and the U.S. in corporate media is you can say, we're not thinking about the possible long-term consequences. Right. People might hate us for generations to come. Like, okay, it's true, but can anybody question the fundamental right of the U.S. and Israel to, commit constant aggression just to defend the Israeli occupation? Does anybody want to step up and do that? No, but it's true. This is at least he's not offering a full-throated endorsement of Israeli aggression like Tom Cotton is. So,
but it's kind of like with Schumer, right? His argument against Netanyahu when he had one for like 5 minutes is that it's not good for Israelis.
Exactly.
It's a similar logic, right? It's like, well, we got to think about how the long-term effects are. Is this going to make Israelis safer?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear someone, at least like, even if it's a racist framing, even if he doesn't care about the Arab civilians, it is nice to hear someone from the military urging even a modicum of caution.
Suggesting a modicum of
suggesting.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of the show. This has been a really depressing episode, and I suspect we're in for a lot of those to come, but hey, that's what we're here for. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Katie, anything you want to plug for this week?
It's going to be a really good show on the Katie Halper Show. There's a chance that we'll do a live stream of the vice presidential debates, but I guarantee a great show on Tuesday night. I can't announce the guest yet because there's some things in the works. But also, I do want to say that I want to do an RIP big time to the wonderful singer and actor and songwriter Chris Christopherson, who died over the weekend at age 88. He wrote, among other songs, Me and Bobby McGee, made famous by Janis Joplin. He was in the Army and he kind of became anti-war in his songwriting. He also was a Rhodes Scholar, which I think I didn't know that. So he and Rachel Maddow share an alma mater. And he comforted Sinead O'Connor when she was booed at a Bob Dylan concert after ripping up a photo of the Pope on Saturday Night Live to protest his cover-up of sexual abuse. As people were booing her, he said, "Don't let the bastards get you down." And he wrote really amazing music and a lot of anti-war music and a lot of music critiquing U.S. foreign policy.
I think he spoke up for Palestine too, didn't he?
Not sure.
Yeah, I think he
I
did.
wouldn't be surprised. He condemned he wrote against he had lyrics that were criticizing the Iraq War, the first one, the good one, in quotes. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been Monday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our website again is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there, support the show, keep us going, and get bonus content. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.